The age-old debate between anybody who goes to the gym or anybody who works out. Calisthenics versus weight training. Which one is better? Listen, both of those methods are resistance modalities as to where you're supposed to gain strength and you should aim to put on muscle tissue. Both of them have their advantages and both of them have their disadvantages. So, which one should you do? Both. It's really that simple. You should do both calisthenics and weight training. So you should either have a calisthenics program to go along with the weight training program or a program that puts both of them together, because that's going to give you the full and total package. Now, the ups and downs to each modality, depending on, who you ask. In my opinion, weight training requires less core stability if you're not doing things like squats, deadlifts, lunges, Bulgarian split squats, exercises that require you to stand. When you're standing and you're doing your weight training exercises, you're engaging more of your core to stabilize your body to be able to lock in so you won't get injured. So there is more core stability that takes place when you're off of your butt, when you're standing, in which calisthenics has a lot more of that, and I'll go into that in just a moment. But when you're doing most of your upper body work, when you're doing weight training, you're seated. So let's think about what happens throughout the day for the average individual. You're laying down to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, you sit down to eat breakfast if you're a breakfast eater. And then you sit down to drive to work, no matter how long that takes, 30, 45 minutes, whatever the case is. For the average person, they sit down at work. That's more sitting. During lunch break, what happens? You sit down to eat lunch. After that, you go back to work and you're sitting down for the rest of your shift. And then you sit down to drive home and make your commute from work back home. You get back home, you sit down to eat dinner. You sit down and spend time with your family. Maybe you get a workout in. I hope you get a workout in after you get off of work. But that's maybe an hour or so that maybe you get a workout that you're actually off of your butt because you've been sitting down all day. No core engagement. Just sitting. For the majority of people who actually have to go to work, they sit all day. So what happens? You get home after you get done with your workout. You're back seated down for dinner. Then you're back sitting down, spending time with your family. Then you're back to bed, lying down. So how much of that requires core engagement? Very, very minimal to little. Depends on what you did at the gym that day that required you to actually be off of your butt. So 9 times out of 10, the average person is on their butt or sitting down or lying down the majority of the day. Now, with a calisthenic individual, the majority of their program is off of their butt. So let's compare 2 exercises really quick. Let's compare the bench press for the weightlifter to a push-up for the calisthenic individual, right? So obviously the person who's weight training can add more resistance. And this is where the calisthenic individual is losing, because the individual who lifts weights can get stronger in those focused muscles because they can add more resistance when needed. However, the downfall to that on this side is the core activation. People who do calisthenics have stronger cores. You can go argue that with whoever you want to argue with. I'm not going to do it. It's irrefutable fact, because you've got somebody lying down on a bench again, solely focusing on those 3 muscle groups that are movers in that bench press. The prime mover, which is the chest, the front delts, and the triceps as the secondary movers. Now, when you have somebody doing a push-up, inadvertently, there is a plank that takes place the entire time because their body is not on the ground. So they have their chest active, they have their shoulders active, they have their triceps active, and the core is active because their body is not touching the ground. Therefore, you have a bit more muscle activation, but the levels of resistance are limited. Yes, you can raise your feet on a chair, and yes, you can put on a weighted vest. But the individual who can put, let's say, 225 on the bench is not going to put 225 on their back to do a push-up. Highly unlikely, never seen it before. Maybe a James Harrison type of individual, but I've never seen it before. So therefore, the person who does the calisthenic push-up has more core engagement than the individual who is lying on the bench to do a bench press. Which one do you want? You should want both. Do both. When it comes to an individual who is doing a lateral pull down versus an individual who is doing a pull up, we've all heard that individual who does lat pull downs say what? I can pull down a lot of weight, but I can't seem to do a pull up to save my life. That's because there is less engagement from the core that takes place when you're doing a lat pull down versus when you're doing a pull up, because you're seated during a lat pull down. Less core engagement. You're isolating a lot more when you're doing weight training versus when you're doing a pull up, you have to pull your entire body up and your core has to activate more. That's why people who do a lot of pull ups tend to have tighter, smaller, firmer cores than individuals who can sit down and do a lat pull down. We do too much sitting. Therefore, which one should you do? Both. You want the best of both worlds. You don't want to just limit yourself to weight training, and you don't just want to limit yourself to calisthenics, because the individual who can pull 220 pounds down on a lat pull down, once again, is not going to put on a 220-pound vest in order to pull themselves up or add the correct amount of weight to make themselves equal out to what they were doing on the lat pull down. You need both. The concern by calisthenics people, or the crying that I've seen of calisthenics people or calisthenics practitioners who solely do calisthenics about weight training individuals, is that one, the weight training individual will get too big. Listen, stop watching the steroid boys. All right? Stop watching the steroid boys and thinking that that's always going to be the end result of someone who does a weight training program. I have been weight training since my early 20s. I'm 44 years old right now. I've never touched a needle. I've never touched a steroid. I've never touched a cutting agent. You are not going to get beyond a certain genetic standpoint unless you're on the help, quote unquote. You will not get too big. Another concern by the calisthenics community is mobility and stability. They're afraid that the individual who lifts weights will get stiff. Listen, we have been programmed so backwards about what it actually ends up being or how beneficial it is for you to lift weights. They try to scare you out of lifting weights. You actually need more muscle tissue for your metabolism to actually be faster. That's the way to speed up your metabolism. The more muscle that you have, the more your body burns calories throughout the day, both at rest and during activity. None of this super tea juice or whatever the case is, none of that stuff. You need muscle tissue, and it increases your bone density. So yes, weight training is going to increase your bone density far more than a calisthenic, because you can produce more weight and move more weight in the weight training. But back to the stiffness aspect, you won't get stiff lifting weights if you stretch. You have to put in a stretching program. So, and then I hope you're seeing that the entire scope of this is that you need both weight training, calisthenics, and a stretching program. You need a good, well-rounded program versus just going to hit some weights or just going to hit some push-ups and calisthenics and, squats and not doing any plyometrics and not doing any stretching. You have to have a well-rounded program or you will lack. Weights won't make you stiff if you stretch. Calisthenics will activate your core a lot more. I hope I've, put the display out there good enough as to where you understand how calisthenics hit the core more. You've got to make sure that you get both programs. and stretch, because the calisthenics people swear that you're going to get stiff during weight training. Yes, you'll get stiff if you don't stretch. So listen, conquer both programs, okay? Put the programs together or reach out to me. I will design your program based on what you need. Propheletics@gmail.com. I'll design your own program, and you can join my online program, which I'm setting up for my individuals right now. It's not as hard as you want it to be. Don't overcome, or it's not as hard as you think it is. It's actually a lot more simple than you think it is. Take the simple approach, simplify it, don't overthink it. I'll do the thinking for you. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you like this content. I hope it was informative. I hope that you share this with your people. I hope that this also debunks a lot of myths and fears that you may have when it comes to either a calisthenics program, a weight training program, or the verses that goes on between them. All right. Like, comment, share, subscribe. I'll see you next time.